Hello and welcome to Praying on Purpose. Once again, I would like to remind all those who join us that our gathering in this forum and studying together is dedicated towards a refuah shalema for Ilana Chana Baskila Brainla. We hope and pray that she has a refuah shalema, speedy recovery, b'soch sha'ar chole Yisrael. So the month of Tishrei is just about over, although we have another week or so until the month of Cheshvan begins. The balance of the month, and particularly the holidays that we have been celebrating, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Shmini Atzeres, they're now behind us. And so therefore, it would seem that our focus, which has been predominantly over the past month on Inyana D'Yoma, on the tefillos and the aspects of the tefillos that pertain to the day, so we're ready to sort of move on and shift gears, get back into sort of a normal mode. But before doing so, I would like to seize the opportunity and focus on 4 words that we just started again on Shmini Atzeres to recite for, well, almost the next 6 months until Pesach begins. And those are the words Mashiv Haruach U'Mored HaGeshem, the words that are inserted into the second Brach of Shmona Esrei, in which we declare that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is one who causes the wind to blow, U'Mored HaGeshem, and the rain to fall. Now, we do not yet start asking for rain. We hold off in Israel for another couple of weeks. We start in early December in the United States. But the idea is that already, particularly in Israel, where there is officially a rainy season, the rainy season at this point officially commences. And so therefore, at this point, we recognize that within the Bria, within creation, there is, of course, the capacity for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to be the one who is Mashiv Baruch Hu Geshem. And we recognize this by declaring this powerful phrase 3 times every day. It may seem to be somewhat insignificant, but as we know, that the halacha tells us that failure to recite these 4 words, if we omit them accidentally, which is perhaps more likely in the first few days and weeks as we adjust to this new format of davening, so we would have to daven over again. They're actually 4 very important, and I would say essential words to the tefillah. Now, the Chazal in Maseches Brachos in the Mishnah tells us that this phrase is referred to as Gevuros Geshamim. The Mishnah tells us Maskirin Gevuros Geshamim B'Tchias HaMesim. The second bracha of Shmona Esrei, which we call Gevuros, is a bracha which deals with Tchias HaMesim, the resurrection of the dead. And in the context of this bracha, we refer to Mashiv Baruch Hu Geshem, which is called Gevuros Geshamim. So I want to focus this morning on why is it that we call this expression Gevuros Geshamim. The word Gevuros comes from the word Gevura, which means strength, power, might. But when you think about it, there are other words in Hebrew which could pretty much describe the same idea. We refer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu as having, as displaying Gedula. We speak about the godless of Hashem. We could speak about Koach. So what is it about Gevura that makes it appropriate in this particular context? This is a question that was posed by the Vilna Gaon in his commentary, the Sefer Shnos Eliyahu. And the Gaon basically explained that there are basically 2 different ways in which HaKadosh Baruch Hu is sort of manifest within Bria. And the timing is actually perfect because we are, of course, reading Parshas Bereishis this week, and we're thinking about all aspects of creation. At least we should be. So the Gra says, for example, when you think about the rising and setting of the sun, this is not called Gevuros Hashem because this is something that happens all the time. Hopefully, we don't take it for granted. Hopefully, it's not the kind of thing that we never think about because, Magia Lanu, it's coming to us. But at the end of the day, the sun rises and the sun sets. There are many, if not most, aspects of creation that just continue on an ongoing basis. I wake up in the morning, I take a breath of fresh air. Where's that air coming from? Well, the oxygen that I'm breathing is coming from the plants that produces through the process of photosynthesis. There, I'm showing off my recollection of 9th grade biology, but it's everywhere. My heart is beating right now. It happens on a regular basis. I don't ask Hashem, please see to it that today my heart beats. This is something that I sort of take for granted. It happens again and again and again on an ongoing basis. And if, and God forbid, it would ever cease to continue, so that would be it. It would be over. So that's not what we refer to as Gevuros Hashem. That, he says, would be maybe godless Hashem. That's where we see Hashem's greatness. But the Gevura, the power, the strength of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is where we see that there is something that is so essential to our existence. It is necessary for our survival, but it is not to be assumed. It is not to be taken for granted. It is not always there. As we know, there have been many times throughout history where there are certain geographical areas which have suffered from terrible droughts. In the land of Israel in particular, we know that they rely on rain, particularly in the rainy season, because when it's not the rainy season, there is not going to be any rain. And so therefore, this dependency upon HaKadosh Baruch Hu by something which is part of creation, part of the essential functioning of the world, but not to be given, not to be given. It is not automatic. It is not like the beating of my heart and the rising of the sun. This is something that I need to ask for, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu needs to grace us with. That if we do, as the Torah tells us what we are supposed to do, and if not, so this is Gevuras Hashem. In other words, what the Gra is telling us is Gevura is when you have the power, the capacity to do something, and you choose to withhold it. That is where we truly see Gevura. So, for example, he doesn't mention this, but the bracha that we say when we hear thunder, we say HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Shekocho u'Gvurasam alei olam. So there again, you see this is very interesting. Koach u'Gvura. Why not just say Shekocho alei olam, that Hashem's power fills the world, or Gvurasam alei olam? So the answer is it's both. Because when we hear thunder, when we see lightning, when we see that awesome display of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's power, we realize that there's tremendous koach, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu could consume the entire world in a flash. But yet we recognize at that moment that there's incredible gevura, because most often I'm not seeing that lightning and I'm not hearing that thunder. I look up and I see a blue sky, and I'm able to sort of live my life without the threat of a very powerful thunderstorm. So it's a moments like that that would realize HaKadosh Baruch Hu's koach u'gvura. Shokocho u'gvuraso malei olam. Gvura is the capacity to do, to give, but at times the choice to withhold. And so that's why the Gra says, that's why Chazal referred to this declaration of Mashav Baruch Morag Hashem as being Gevuros Geshamim, because here's where we see not only the godless of Hashem, but the Gevura, the capacity to withhold. The truth is, when you look more closely at this bracha of Techiyas HaMesim, and we're not going to really talk about this much at the moment, but you see the other things that we are not so much asking for in the context of this bracha, but recognize that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Somech Noflim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Rofei Cholim. Hashem supports and assists those who have fallen, which of course means more than just literally somebody who's falling to the floor, although that as well. But the Noflim in this context refer to people who are finding themselves in a very downtrodden state. Rofei Cholim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu's capacity to go ahead and to heal the sick. Here are examples within nature, multiple examples of things that are not to be assumed, not to be taken for granted. This, I believe, is also a great opportunity for us to just reflect on the fact that Chazal tell us, Ezo Gibor, how do we know within humanity when we see somebody who is considered to be a Gibor, who is truly a Gibor, a strong person? Chazal tell us, not a person who can bench press 250 pounds, not a person who go ahead and who can, lift a car with his bare hands. Ezo Gibor, Hakovesh Es Yitzro, a person who has the capacity to react, a person who has a certain inclination and drive to do something and has the power to do it. I can do it. I can act, but I choose not to. Hakovesh Es Yitzro, I hold myself back. That is, Chazal tell us, that is Gevura. And there are times that we are supposed to emulate that very midah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There is a mitzvah of a halachta b'drachav. We have to emulate the ways of Hashem. One of the ways we emulate HaKadosh Baruch Hu is by exercising Gevura, which means that just because I can say something, just because I can act in a certain way, just because somebody perhaps has done something which warrants a certain reaction, doesn't mean I need to and doesn't mean I should. And when I can hold back, when I can reserve my right to do that another time and not at all, so that I'm displaying Gevura. So the declaration of Mashav Baruch Morag Hashem, which is called by Chazal Gevuros Geshamim, the Gra says that word is used because it reflects HaKadosh Baruch Hu's capacity to give, but his deliberate intentional choice to not always do so in order to elicit a response from us. We know that rain is one of those things that we cannot and we should not take for granted. HaKadosh Baruch Hu holds this over our head, so to speak, literally and figuratively, as a means of forcing us to recognize, because unfortunately there's the capacity, the human capacity to forget that we are dependent, we are reliant on HaKadosh Baruch Hu for everything. So while we take the rising and the setting of the sun for granted, and the beating of our hearts for granted, and the breathing of our oxygen for granted, it just happens automatically. Rain does not happen automatically. There we see HaKadosh Baruch Hu's display of Gevura. May we all be zocha as we say these words, Mashav Baruch Morag Hashem, again, 3 times a day from now until Pesach, to remember, first of all, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is, of course, in every way, the ultimate Gibor, Hashem, who we describe in our davening as Hakel, Hagadol, Hagibor, Vahanora, we should reflect on this concept of Gevura. And I think as well, think about ways in our own life that we can continue to emulate the ways of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, displaying our own capacity to be Giborim, to display Gevura at times that's necessary, reminding ourselves, is El Gibor HaKovesh Etz Yisro, a person who can act, but in certain circumstances chooses not to. Thank you so much. Wishing you all a wonderful day.